Today is I think it's a cause for celebration, but it's tempered somewhat by the loss of Senator Chris Birch yesterday. I think it was a shock to all of Alaska. It was certainly a shock to us. Chris was an engineer. He built things. And he was a longtime Alaskan, did a lot of work both in the private and public sector, including being on the Assembly and, of course, in the Senate and other work before then. And he was I think, a mover and shaker. And he was definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with. He was a force to be reckoned with in the Senate. But one of the things he always talked about doing was building Alaska, making sure that our resources worked for us, not just for this generation, but future generations as well. And of all the accomplishments that Chris had under his belt, I think none is going to be greater than the fact that I think he's going to be remembered as a great father and a great husband. But our condolences go out to his family, his two kids and his wife Pam, and I think he's got a bit of a legacy that's going to live on. So with that, just a few prepared words that we have here. So as we know, for years Alaska's been struggling with trying to put a permanent fiscal plan in place. So when I ran for governor, my message was pretty clear: restore and protect the PFD, improve crime and public safety, put into place a permanent fiscal plan, and diversify and grow the economy and create jobs. So more simply put, we would do these things that Alaskans expect of all politicians. Alaska's revenue picture is very different than it was a year ago. In October 2018, oil was hovering around $85 a barrel. By December of that year, oil had dropped to $54 a barrel. That was a $1.7 billion gap in the budget. If it had held at $85 a barrel, we'd probably be having a different conversation here in Alaska, at least for a little while. The dramatic change in revenue necessitated a dramatic change in how we approach the budget. So on February 13th, we introduced the budget. We spent 4 months engaged in dialogue with the legislature and Alaskans and various other groups within Alaska. The legislature then took it upon themselves to institute a 2.9% or $270 million reduction in the overall budget. I think we all recognize that the budget, we're running out of savings, and the budget gap is real, and that we need to do something quickly to solve that issue. So even with their work, a $1 billion deficit remained, requiring vetoes by myself. As a result, a robust and long overdue discussion among Alaskans began that continues to this very moment. It's not meant to harm Alaskans, and I want to repeat that. I think a lot of it has been written and said that the intent of the vetoes is somehow to harm Alaska. Nothing can be further from the truth. What's going to harm Alaska is if we pretend there is no budget deficit. What's going to harm Alaska is if we pretend we have endless amounts of money and don't have to make any tough decisions. I didn't want to pretend anymore. And I have a number of Alaskans that have thanked me for not pretending, and of course we have some Alaskans that wish I would continue to pretend that we have copious amounts of money. So I want to also say that I'm under no illusions that the impacts of these reductions aren't felt by Alaskans, and they are. When you're reducing budgets by the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, it's certainly going to have an impact on Alaskans and programs and services. But I've had Alaskans come up to me in which these impacts directly affect them, actually thank me, even though the impacts are severe on some of these groups and some individuals. They recognize that action had to be taken. But with that said, there's a bit of a plus and a minus with the long time this has taken to get to this point here today in August. Budgets are usually done in April, and if it was done in April, we could have had I think a different conversation with Alaskans, because it would have been before the fiscal year, and it would have gotten a lot more input before the fiscal year. As a result, we didn't really start getting a tremendous amount of input until after the fiscal year, when the fiscal year started. But nonetheless, we listen to Alaskans. I mean, that's our job. We don't ignore Alaskans, we listen to Alaskans. So we've been having a robust discussion, once again, with individual Alaskans, Alaskans associated with groups, everyday Alaskans, working Alaskans, Alaskans that are unemployed. And as a result of those discussions, there have been modifications to this budget. So SB 2002 provides funding for the following: $75 million in state funds that capture nearly $1 billion in federal highway monies, as well as infrastructure dollars for clean water programs throughout the state. These funds are critical to our communities and economy, and the remarkable men and women, represented in part by those here today, that have dedicated their careers to developing and building this great state, are going to be able to use this resource that's going to be signed into law today to help build this great state even further. Also, what's included in the budget, or as a result of the budget action, is Power Cost Equalization, the Alaska Performance Scholarship, and other programs contained within what they call the reverse sweep. We also have grants for homelessness in this budget, senior housing, funding for the Inter-Island Ferry Authority, the Alaska Marine Highway System Vessel Overhaul and Certification, Highland Mountain Women's Health Unit, and more. My administration will be making many more decisions that will impact Alaskans in the very near future. We just received the operating budget a day ago. We're going through that operating budget as we speak, and we'll be coming up with decisions shortly that we'll be announcing for Alaskans. We hope, as I mentioned earlier, we hope to have that done. We had hoped to have that done in April, but that wasn't going to be the case, so we have to deal with it now, and we are. So with that, we're going to take a moment and sign the bill. I want to thank these folks behind me. I want to thank all of Alaskans for having the patience with the legislative process in Juneau. It's been a long year in terms of the legislative process. Hopefully we'll bring it to a close here soon with the signing of this bill and the work we'll do on 2001 here shortly.